Good afternoon and welcome to the next in our series of webinars on the Solicitors Qualifying Examination, or the SQE. I think this is our first webinar since lockdown was eased over the weekend, but you'll see clearly that I still haven't had a professional haircut. I certainly didn't go to a pub or a cafe over the weekend. About as exciting as it got for me was going to a playground. I hasten to add that was with my two small children. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Ben Fisher. I work at the Solicitors Regulation Authority. You'll find me today in a miserable grey day in Birmingham in my house, and about 60 miles away I'm joined by Julie Brannan, who lives in Oxfordshire, I think, and she's our Director of Training and Education. And today we're going to be talking about the SQE and the implications specifically for smaller law firms and smaller businesses. I think there's some interesting stuff and some interesting opportunities for small firms, particularly around flexibility of training, some better information around recruitment, and even if you're a firm who's thinking at the moment, well, wow, I'm dealing with coronavirus, recruitment and trainees are the furthest thing from my mind. We'll also be talking about some opportunities around apprenticeships, and we know it's tough out there, but there's some quite interesting financial incentives around taking on apprentices. So that's what we're going to be covering, but I think it's probably first, before we go into the detail of what it means for firms, reminding everyone what the SQE is. So Julie, over to you. What is the SQE?
Yes, so as you can see from the first slide, it's a single rigorous assessment that everybody who wants to qualify as a solicitor of England and Wales must pass. So technically there are 4 elements which are set out there in the jigsaw puzzle. Everybody's going to have a degree or equivalent qualification or experience. They're going to need to pass the 2 SQE assessments. They will have to complete at least 2 years qualifying work experience, and they'll have to meet our character and suitability requirements as at present. So single exam for everybody to take, and what it means is that we can be sure that everybody has demonstrated the high standards needed for practice as a solicitor against a consistent standard at a consistent level. So the focus of our regulation is around assuring standards at point of admission through the SQE, rather than specifying particular qualifications or pathways that people must follow. And we are going to be introducing, or we plan to introduce SQE in the autumn of 2021. There are some transitional arrangements in place so that people who have started to train don't have to go back to the beginning, and they can continue along the pathway that they have started as SQE comes in, but we'll perhaps pick that up later, Ben.
Yeah, no, that's great. So you've mentioned several times there it's about consistency of standards. That's what this is about. Was that a problem in the current system? Why are we changing that?
Yeah, so at the moment we have a very dispersed model of assessment, and people will be familiar with the idea that you perhaps do a qualifying law degree or a CP conversion course, and then you go on to do your LPC, and then you do your period of recognised training, and at each of those points there is an assessment, quite properly so, but there are 110 universities who each set and mark their own law degrees. We've got lots of different universities who also set and mark their own CPEs. We've got 26 odd LPC providers, and then in terms of the final hurdle, the final decision, which means that people can be admitted as a solicitor, that's taken by law firms at the end of a period of recognised training, and we have 5,000 authorised training providers. Not all of them have a trainee at any one time, but 5,000 organisations that we have authorised to make those that final decision. And it's not a criticism of anybody involved in that. People do their best to make sure that those decisions are made carefully and appropriately, but we just don't have systems in place to make sure that those decisions are all being taken consistently and fairly against the same standard. And so that is at the heart of what we feel is a concern at the moment. Just a dispersed system with people making different decisions about admission, that where we can't be absolutely sure that they're all being made to the same standard.
Which I suppose comes down to an issue of then trust, doesn't it? We want the public to be able to trust that all solicitors have met the same standard, but also employers and people recruiting solicitors want to know that, you know, people have, when they've qualified through a certain route, that they have met the same standard.
So that's absolutely right. It's a question of consumer protection, so making sure that everybody really is safe to practice and competent to practice. But it's also a question of fairness to people coming through. It's not fair if somebody has to pass perhaps a higher hurdle than somebody around the corner where they're being assessed to a different standard.
And we'll probably go on to discuss when we talk about qualifying work experience. And another and final problem with the current system is it's pretty expensive to train, but also this, some people sometimes refer to it as training contract bottleneck, where people spend a lot of money on a legal practice course, but then they can't get a training contract, and they get a bit stuck, and you get some very sort of able and talented people who sometimes can't qualify as a solicitor because of that bottleneck.
So I think that's absolutely right, and that comes from the fact that we are, if you like, using qualifications that we specify along a particular pathway as a proxy for standards at point of admission, and that does mean that there are people who just, as you say, Ben, get stuck because perhaps they can't afford to progress, or perhaps it doesn't fit with their personal circumstances. They need a bit more flexibility in terms of the length of time that it's going to take for them to develop the skills and competencies. What we're interested in is making sure that people are competent and have demonstrated the necessary high standards when we admit them as solicitors, and that means if we are sure about that, we can be more flexible about how people acquire those standards.
Yeah, that's great. So let's move on to what the assessments cover. So let's start with SQE1, which is the first stage of the SQE assessment.
Yeah, so moving on to the next slide, this is SQE1, as it says at the top there, is about functioning legal knowledge. And what we mean by that is the really core, critical ability that solicitors need to have to identify relevant legal principles and use them to address clients' problems, to identify next steps, to reach decisions. So it's applying their legal knowledge in practical context, and that's what we will test through SQE1. At the same time, the question will have, so as the slide says, there'll be 2 papers, 180 questions in each. These will be single best answer multiple choice questions, and as well as testing the application of legal knowledge, we will scatter throughout the 2 papers ethical questions. Clearly very, very important for us to check that candidates who want to qualify as solicitors can confidently address ethical issues, and they know their way around the code of conduct and so on. So we will be checking all of that at the same time through SQE1.
And that's sort of dispersed throughout, because in real life, ethical dilemmas don't necessarily come neatly sort of flagged as here's an ethical dilemma. You've got to be able to identify where there might be an issue of professional conduct.
Yes, absolutely right. So the ethical questions are not going to come with a little label that says, look at me, I'm an ethical problem. It'll be for candidates to recognise that an ethical issue has arisen and to address that appropriately.
And so if we see on the next slide there, we should be able to see all the areas of law that SQE1 covers. But one of the things you said there is that we've gone for a sort of an approach which this is single best answer multiple choice questions. And I know, because we hear people sort of speaking to us about this, some people have concerns about, well, is it as rigorous if you're asking multiple choice questions? Are people just going to regurgitate knowledge? So why have we chosen that approach? How can we assure people of that?
Yeah, so first of all, this is intended to be a rigorous assessment, and we know from the pilots that we've already conducted that actually this is a tough test. The pilot candidates who took it found it difficult. Had we set a pass mark on this in accordance with the processes that we will use when the assessment goes live, more than half the pilot candidates would have failed the assessment. So this is a tough test. We know that this form of question can test application, so they can test candidates' ability to take their legal knowledge and use it in practical contexts. There's lots of experience around this. This is not cutting edge by any manner of means. It's used widely, for example, in medical assessment, but it's also used in legal assessment. It's what the bar uses as part of the bar professional training course assessment, and it's used in the United States as part of the New York bar exam, the US multi-state bar exam. So it's very, very widely used in exactly this way, not to test just simple regurgitation of the law, but to test application. So we know it can be tested, it can be used to test what we want to test, but it also gives us two advantages over perhaps the more traditional essay style of assessment. First of all, it enables us to test the breadth of legal knowledge. You can see from the slide there the extent of the curriculum which we are assessing through SQE 1. It covers all the foundations of legal knowledge which is taught and assessed through the law degree or through the CPE, and also the core subjects in the LPC. So it's a very, very big body of legal knowledge, and these questions can test that in breadth. It's not like doing a three essay exam where you've demonstrated you know three topics well, but you don't know, beyond that you haven't demonstrated whether you know anything outside those topics. So it tests.
It's almost easier for a candidate to get lucky, isn't it, in that
yes.
scenario if the right questions come up as a.
So you'll all recognise that, the things that I revised best came up, I questions spotted well. That sort of scenarios is very, very common. It's much harder to do in this form of testing where you've got to such a large breadth of questions. And also it's a fair, objective form of testing. So it's computer marked, and so there can be no question, no judgment there that might be biased. It's the most objective form of testing that you can envisage. So that's the content of those assessments, and I guess just to add, all of the questions will be written by solicitors. Solicitors, all our question writers and all our assessors, saving client interviewing, will be solicitors, which is also absolutely critical to make sure this is set at the right standard.
And we have other webinars if people want to look at it about how we develop those questions in more detail. But so let's move on to, if you're a law firm, then we're not actually testing practical legal skills in SQE1. So if you're a law firm, a lot of law firms or legal businesses might be considering taking on a trainee after they've done SQE1 potentially. They might have done a law degree that had SQE preparation, or they might have done another degree and then done a preparation course for SQE1. So what information might firms get at that point, and how can they assure themselves that people might have the skills they need?
Yes, you're quite right. So we shall see in a moment how SQE2 assesses skills. SQE1 is not designed to do that. We thought about that very carefully. We went out and talked to a lot of firms about that, and in fairness, firms had different views, and some firms did, for perfectly understandable reasons, say to us that it was very important to them when they were recruiting people that candidates had basic abilities to write and to do legal research in particular. And we recognise that. Of course, that by definition is going to be at a lower standard. It's not at point of admission standard. And in fact, the writing skills and the legal research skills that that firms will want may well vary from role to role and indeed firm to firm. And so what we suggest is that if that is very important for you, then the key thing to do is to include that as part of your recruitment and selection processes. Include a writing assessment, or include a piece of legal research assessment, and you can check then and compare your candidates' skills as part of your own processes.
And that will vary from firm to firm
Quite,
as to how you
yes.
want to do that, don't you? Which is one of the reasons we don't necessarily want to specify. So let's move on to SQE2 then, and how that tests practical legal skills. So do you want to talk us through that, Julie?
Yeah. So really, really important to recognise that legal skills are critical to safe practice as a solicitor, and there's a great raft of skills that we simply cannot assess through SQE1. SQE1 will not involve any legal writing, and legal writing is the bread and butter of a solicitor. So through SQE2 we will be assessing the full range of skills that solicitors need to practice. We'll come on to look at those in a bit more detail in a moment. But these will be assessed through simulations of the tasks that a solicitor undertakes in practice sitting at their desk. So it'll be writing a letter of advice to a client, doing a client interview, undertaking a piece of advocacy. It'll be those simulations of those tasks that that solicitors carry out. And it's also important to recognise that whilst we want to check that somebody has a good manner and can manage a client properly, and that they can communicate clearly and effectively, so we'll be testing all those skills. At the same time, a beautifully written letter also needs to be correct from a legal point of view. So we will be equally assessing both skills and law, 50-50 weighting of in terms of those requirements. So this is another opportunity to test candidates' ability to apply legal principles in the context of demonstrating their skills. And yet again, to stress the point about ethics, ethical questions will pervade. They will not necessarily be in all 16 of these exercises that we will ask people to undertake, because we want people to spot them and spot whether there is an ethical question or not. But you know, that is important and will be picked up and assessed as part of this overall assessment. So, yep, this is a big assessment. You can see from the slide there, 16 individual tests, 14 hours of testing in total, so a really very substantial assessment of candidates' legal skills.
And on the next slide, I think if we haven't already moved on to that, but on the next slide, you'll see the areas covered. Just to for clear to people, SQE2 you can only take after you've done SQE1, and we anticipate that a lot of people might take SQE2 after they've done 2 years qualifying work experience, because they'll have helped develop the types of skills that we have listed there that you'll be doing. But it might not be that some people might want to take SQE2 earlier. So again, that could vary from candidate to candidate.
It certainly could, and it's for individual employers to work out what suits their businesses best. We are seeing different models emerge. We're seeing some people who say they want everybody to have all skills or all SQE assessments completed before they do QWE, but we're also seeing people who are going for a much more integrated approach, where people will take their assessments and do their qualifying work experience at the same time. And certainly we know from our pilot that work experience can help people develop the skills that they need for that they're going to be assessed on for SQE2. So we think that you know, as Ben says, it's a decision for businesses to make, but qualifying work experience can certainly help people reach the standard of assessment in SQE2, which is not the LPC skills standard, it is day one of a solicitor standard. So having that sort of awareness and experience of how qualified professionals work in the office, I think it can be very helpful.
And so you mentioned there qualifying work experience, so I think you used the acronym QWE, just for anyone who wasn't sure what that was. No, that's all right. You can obviously get acronym overload when it comes to the SQE. So that's one of the big changes that is also coming about. And we touched upon earlier that one of the problems with the current system is this training contract bottleneck. So although training contracts will still exist under the new system, they're not mandatory anymore. There's a more flexible approach, and that's qualifying work experience. Do you want to talk us through, Julie, what our approach is there?
Yeah, before I just go on to that, let me just very briefly pick up the practical legal skills assessments contents and skills
yes.
and context. Just to pick up on that very briefly, you can see on the slide there the 6 skills that are assessed are set out there, and that we've been very consistent about that all the way through the development of the SQE, and we've had very consistent feedback from people that those are the skills that do need to be assessed when somebody qualifies as a solicitor. Embedded in in there, just a point of detail, will be points of negotiation. Negotiation is one of the skills included in the Statement of Solicitor Competence, and that will be picked up perhaps through a piece of case and matter analysis, or in the context of writing a piece of legal advice and so on. So that will be picked up too. The contexts in which this is are assessed are focused very much around the reserved areas of practice. So recognising that we are licensing people, we are authorising people to practice in particular areas of law, and that's where we need to concentrate our the focus of our assessment. But also we've added in there business organisation rules and procedures, because that's such a very large area of practice, and everybody will be assessed in all of those skills across all of those practice contexts. So the skills will be sampled across those contexts, and everybody will take the same assessment, and regardless really of their intended area of practice. And again, that just recognises that we have one single solicitor qualification with a consistent set of practice rights that everybody gets when they're admitted as a solicitor. So sorry just for picking up on that then before we went into QWE, to use the acronym.
So I jumped ahead to QWE. So let's move on to QWE now. Do you want to explain? So we've changed. I suppose we've got a more flexible approach to what was in the current system, the training contract.
We have, and just pausing there and picking up, of course, the two problems that Ben identified at the start in the current system are, first of all, that people can get stuck and they can't get, because they can't get a training contract, so the training contract bottleneck, and the fact that at the end of the training contract, there is no consistency in terms of the signing off of trainees ahead of admission as a solicitor. So those are the two issues that we are trying to address through qualifying work experience. So first of all, qualifying work experience is broader. It's 2 years experience of legal services, which gives a candidate the opportunity to develop the competencies in the Statement of Solicitor Competence. So the critical thing there is it's developmental. There is no assessment of competence as part of QWE, unlike the training contract, where there is an assessment of competence at the end of the training contract by the training principal. Now for us, that actually is an important additional protection, because it moves away from the risk that there are variable standards around the current sign-off. It's absolutely critically important that we do check that somebody is competent at point of admission, but we do that through SQE1 and SQE2 so that everybody is fairly assessed against the same standards. So qualifying work experience, as I said a moment ago, then becomes developmental, becomes a mechanism to help people develop the skills and knowledge and competencies that they require when they're admitted as a solicitor.
So what will a solicitor be signing off then, if they're not signing off how good someone is, so to speak? What will they be signing off?
So they're signing off the amount of time of qualifying work experience. So as the slide says, actually it can happen in a number of different organisations. So it can be up to 2 years, but it might be, say 6 months. So the solicitor is signing off the length of time of the qualifying work experience, that somebody has indeed had the opportunity to develop the competencies in some or all of the competencies in the Statement of Solicitor Competence, and also that there are no ethical issues that arose during the training contract which might be relevant to an assessment of character and suitability. So that's again another important check there in relation to ethics. And of course that's the other very, very critically important developmental role of qualifying work experience, the opportunity for individuals not just to demonstrate through the assessment that they know the rules and they know how to apply the rules, but that they have seen ethical dilemmas in operation, and they have learned from experienced professionals what the proper approach is to when you're faced with a difficult ethical problem. So they've learned, they've absorbed that professionalism and have strong ethical values, and that's a very, very important part of qualifying work experience. So it is important, and it is our requirement, that the person who signs off QWE is a solicitor, because that's an important regulatory declaration to us, and we very much hope this doesn't happen, but if somebody made a false declaration to us around qualifying work experience, then we could take regulatory action against the person making that declaration. Bit more flexibility in terms of it can include working in a law clinic, working as a paralegal, as well as working on in a traditional training contract. No requirement for 3 practice areas. It's much more around the competences which are set out in the Statement of Solicitor Competence. And we are publishing resources on our website to support the law firms and also people doing qualifying work experience. So, for example, we've just recently put on our website some very nice templates to enable you to log your experience as you're going through qualifying work experience. So you've got a check and a record of the competencies that you have gained and the experience you have, the tasks that you've undertaken that have helped you develop the competencies in the Statement of Solicitor Competence. So that's all set out on our website. And there's more to come, more information about what good qualifying work experience looks like, and the protections around the sign-off at the end of that. So watch that space.
So you've touched upon some of the things which there's opportunities for law firms around this, around the flexibility. So we've shifted, I suppose, the check in terms of someone's competence has moved on to the SQE1 and the SQE2 assessments rather than a solicitor or law firm signing off that the competence in the same way they do now. But do you want to talk through that flexibility you talked about? Do you want to go into a bit of the detail? Where's the potential, particularly for smaller law firms and businesses? Where's the potential for them to take opportunities?
Yeah, so I don't know if we move on to the next slide and the benefits from firm, because this is picked up there in terms of the flexibilities around recruitment, Ben's. People can qualify as solicitors under the SQE model through doing a traditional training contract, but also through working, for example, as a paralegal. So that is a win-win for lots of organisations. It means, from a law firm's point of view, that your paralegal is charged out, is a source of revenue, so contributes to the income of the law firm, but at the same time the paralegal is being trained and is learning to develop those competencies in the Statement of Solicitor Competence. And of course there is an obligation on the law firm to supervise these people properly and make sure that the standard of the work that goes out through the door is appropriate, but that still does mean it's an opportunity for the paralegal to learn at the same time as contributing to the income of the law firm. So a benefit there. You may have existing employees who have aspirations to qualify as a solicitor, and again, this means that it's easier for them to do that. We do require a degree or equivalent qualification or experience, but you may have people on your staff who already have a degree, and then they can go off and they can do SQE preparatory training. We're aware that there are significant developments in the training market at the moment, with development of online training that can be done remotely, that can be done over time at an individual candidate's pace, at home, in the evenings or at weekends. So much more flexibility, much more opportunity for earning and learning at the same time. And of course there is the opportunity to recruit through apprenticeship routes, and I know we're going to come on to that in a moment. So a lot more flexibility and a lot more opportunity, I think, for you to look across the talent that you've already got in your organisation and see whether you can bring on that talent in the interest of the individual and also in the interest of the business.
And what about if you're looking further afield, outside? What type of information will people be having about that's, I suppose, an improvement on the current system when it comes to the SQE? So, for instance, I understand SQE1 results will be published, and one of the big benefits is, whereas if you've done a law degree and you have a mark to it, so you might not have total confidence that, apples for apples comparisons between degrees, but you will have that with the SQE. Is that right?
So absolutely. So on the one hand, we've talked about the flexibility in being able to go and get talent in different places, but the other great merit of the SQE is that you've got access to standardised data about candidates' performance in a test of their legal knowledge SQE1 and legal skills SQE2, and so that's relevant, I guess, if you're picking people up before qualification, but also on admission. If you're recruiting newly qualified solicitors who've come through SQE, you've got that level playing field of information. And we know from talking to recruiters and law firms that very often that people do go back to A-levels so that they can get that point of comparison, that fair point of comparison on a national scale between different candidates. But of course A-levels will, in most cases be a long time ago, and they may have been in subjects very, very remote from working as a solicitor. So we hope that this gives better information and more consistent information so that you can compare your candidates more fairly and consistently against the same standard and the same set of results.
I think a lot of people would agree they wouldn't want to be necessarily judged entirely on their 17, 18-year-olds' performance in the assessment.
Absolutely.
A lot can change even in a few years, can't it? So that's some of the opportunities. I think tailoring your training, flexibility of recruitment, better information about how you're recruiting. But one area we thought would be useful to talk about is apprenticeships as well, because there are opportunities there.
Yep. So we did want to give a particular shout out to this because this is a route where we are seeing increasing numbers being picked up and being trained. It's still very relatively early days for apprenticeships. The first apprentices started, I think we had a cohort of 25 who started in September 2016, and you can see from the slide that we've now got over 500 apprentices on programme coming through the system, and we hear very positive words about all of this from apprentices. I have to say, I think I'm about to be bombed by not your little children, Ben, but my rather older children. So if you just bear with me a second before I just go and check, tell them not to come in.
Well, I will carry on speaking about apprenticeship while we have this short interlude. We almost need some sort of a popcorn break music, but yes, but while Julie comes back, usually I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, so it's usually them who's invading. So Julie, have you tamed your children?
I've tamed my 20-year-old who's just come back from 5 days camping in the rain, so...
Oh wow! Well, well, hopefully she's delighted to be indoors again. So we were just talking about apprenticeships, and perhaps that'd be more preferable than 5 days camping at the moment. But I think we were saying that not only are they good for apprentices, they can be really good for businesses as well.
Yeah, one of the things that businesses say to us is first of all, they're surprised by how quickly apprentices develop. So their skills and their knowledge come on really on the whole, very quickly. Of course, that there'll be some variation in that, but on the whole, it works very well as a training method. But also, what they like about their apprentices is that they are very loyal and very committed to the organisation. So in terms of staff turnover, they get very, very engaged employees who I suppose are developed in the likeness of the organisation. So that's a very big gain for the business. There's also a financial gain as we set out in the slide. So there is government it's not government funding, it's funding through the apprenticeship levy. So businesses who have a payroll of less than £3 million can draw down funding from the apprenticeship levy fund to pay the costs of apprenticeship training. If you have a payroll of above £3 million, then you will be a contributor to the apprenticeship levy, but you can use what you have contributed to the levy again to fund the costs of apprenticeships. And that can be used both for the full 6-year apprenticeship route starting at school with school leavers, so at 18 plus, but it can also be used actually for graduates. So graduates with a law degree or perhaps a non-law degree then wanting to take a conversion course can jump in to the apprenticeship and can take the last years of the apprenticeship and SQE 1 and 2 and at least 2 years qualifying work experience under the apprenticeship wrapper. And that can also be funded through the apprenticeship levy. So the costs of the assessment of SQE 1 and SQE 2 can be funded through the apprenticeship levy, and also the costs of any associated training. The 21 plus the graduate apprenticeship, that the funding is prorated, but nevertheless there is funding that helps with that. So I think that's a really useful source of income for law firms, and particularly smaller law firms, as I say, who actually don't have to, if it's payroll of under £3 million, you don't have to pay into the apprenticeship levy fund in the first place. And we've put there on the slide just a link to the government website with more information about and our own website with more information about apprenticeships. So there are some resources there for people to pick up and read. There are a wide range of well-known legal professional trainers who offer training for through the apprenticeship route as well. So the training is already well established and out there and available for people. But it's a useful route, I think, for people to be aware of and to think about, and it's an opportunity that really comes because of SQE, because fundamentally, of course, the apprentices will be assessed through SQE to exactly the same standard as somebody who has come a degree route or a training contract route.
Yes, so something for people to think about there. Now, I suppose we're drawing to the close of the webinar now, but a final question for you, Julie. Obviously, it's a real tough time for a lot of firms out there. Everyone's affected in different ways by what's going on at the moment. But let's hope in the coming years, a lot of firms will still be recruiting people. And so, what would be your sort of final tips for law firms to think about in terms of moving towards the SQE coming in and beyond?
So I think it's worth taking some time out to sort of stand back and think about your recruitment. Where do you recruit from at the moment? Can you see that there are potential sources of talent out there that you don't recruit from that you want to, that this gives you the opportunity to do? So think about your recruitment funnel and whether you can get access to greater talent. And then think also about your training. The training through qualifying work experience is aligned around the statement of solicitor competence. So does the training that you offer can that help people develop the competencies set out there? So it's much more around those competencies rather than around particular practice areas. And finally, just we said we would return to transition. You will have people coming to you in terms of who want as part of the recruitment cycle, who have come the LPC route and others who've come the SQE route. Now, I think what they would find very helpful is clarity from law firms about what you are looking for. Are you content to recruit people from either route? Because actually what you're interested in is talent, or over time do you think you will be wanting to pick up people more likely to pick up people from one route or the other. So I think clarity around that, and probably clarity if you have recruitment pages on your website around your expectations in relation to that, I think would be very, very helpful for candidates who are coming through into recruitment.
Well, thank you, Julie. I hope you guys out there have found that an interesting and helpful webinar. We will be sending out and putting a link to a post-event survey for this, so let us know your views. We've also put up on the slide there ways you can get involved or get in touch or keep up to date. Send us in your questions. We've been developing the SQE now in terms of the actual detail of the assessment for getting on to almost sort of 18 months, 2 years, and the feedback we've got is really useful, but we still want it to keep on coming in, because actually if you think there's resources missing or questions you don't have answered, we want to try and address them. But otherwise, thank you for joining us. Julie, I'll leave you to be reunited with your family. I'll be reunited with the sandwich I was starting to make before this, and otherwise I hope everyone has an excellent afternoon. So thank you very much.
Thank you.